At our wedding reception, my husband danced with his mom. As they swayed, she whispered, "You'll always be mine first, not hers." He smirked and nodded. I walked up, grabbed the microphone, and said, "Let's show everyone the wedding gift you two gave me." Their smiles disappeared as the whole room saw what they'd been hiding. We got married at a beautiful, old venue in Savannah, Georgia. The place had brick walls, soft lighting from chandeliers, and felt classy, just like I always dreamed my wedding would be. Everything looked perfect on the outside. Brandon and I had been together for 4 years. He was charming, always knew the right things to say. In the beginning, he seemed thoughtful and caring. He planned weekend trips, gave me sweet little gifts, and made me feel special. But there was always something strange about his relationship with his mom, Margaret. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. She kept inserting herself into our relationship, pretending she was just being helpful. If I planned a date night, she'd fake an emergency and guilt-trip Brandon into leaving. If I made dinner, she'd say no one cooked like she did. If I talked about our future, she'd smile tightly and say, "We'll see." It started small, and I ignored it. Now I realize I shouldn't have. During the reception, everyone was having fun, laughing, drinking, dancing. I sat at the sweetheart table, watching it all with a glass of champagne in hand. Then the DJ called for the mother-son dance. I expected a sweet moment. It's tradition, right? But what I saw made my stomach turn. Margaret walked up, smiling smugly. Brandon took her hand without hesitation. A slow song played, they danced. Then she leaned in close and whispered in his ear. He smirked. He nodded. That's when I knew, whatever she said wasn't normal. It wasn't sweet or sentimental. It was wrong. My whole body tensed, my heart pounded. I needed to know what she said. When the song ended, she pulled away slowly, her nails brushing his shoulder. Brandon smiled and walked off to grab a drink. I saw my chance. I stood up and walked over to her. "Beautiful dance," I said. She tilted her head, eyes sparkling like she knew a secret. "It was special," she replied softly. "What did you say to him?" I asked. She leaned in and whispered, "You'll always be mine first, not hers." She wanted me to hear it. She wanted to hurt me. And the worst part? Brandon didn't reject it. He agreed. I could have walked away right then. But I didn't. Because I had something they didn't know about. I had proof. And I wasn't going to let them win. I stood tall, smoothed my dress, and walked to the DJ booth. I took the mic and said, "Before we go on celebrating, I'd like to show everyone a little wedding gift my husband and his mother gave me." The room went quiet. All eyes were on me. Brandon stopped in his tracks near the bar. Margaret's smile vanished. I pulled a remote from my bouquet. It was connected to the big screen behind us. Their faces turned pale. I pressed play. The screen lit up. The truth played for everyone to see. The room went silent. All laughter stopped. Guests turned toward the screen, confused. Brandon stood frozen. His drink shook in his hand. Margaret gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Everyone finally saw who they really were. They knew. They knew what was coming. The video started playing. The footage was a little blurry. It came from a small security camera I had secretly placed. Neither of them knew it was there. The screen lit up. We weren't at the wedding anymore. We were in Margaret's kitchen, the one place I always hated, because she made sure I never felt welcome there. Brandon was leaning against the counter, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. Margaret stood across from him with a glass of wine, slowly swirling it like she wasn't in any rush. "You don't have to go through with this, you know," she said. Her voice was sweet, too sweet, the way she always talked when she was trying to get her way. Brandon sighed. "Mom, we've talked about this." "Have we?" she said, tilting her head, "because I don't think you get it. Once you marry her, things will change, and I don't like that." Brandon gave a short laugh. "It's not like that. You'll still be my..." She cut him off, stepping closer. "Will I?" She put her wine glass down and touched his face. Her nails slowly dragged down his cheek, staying there just a bit too long. People in the wedding hall gasped. Some of my bridesmaids covered their mouths. On the screen, Margaret looked intense, almost hungry. "I raised you. I made you who you are. She doesn't really know you," she whispered. "She never will." Brandon let out a breath. Like this was a conversation they'd had many times before. Like this was normal. Then came the part that broke me. "You'll always be mine first," Margaret said. not hers. And right there, in front of everyone, my new husband smiled. And nodded. I know, he said. The room exploded. People gasped, some whispered. Chairs scraped the floor as guests shifted in shock. Brandon rushed toward me. I took a step back and held up my hand. Aha, I said, we're not done. Brandon's chest was rising and falling fast. His hands were clenched into fists. Where the hell did you get that? He asked, his voice low and angry. Margaret stood up, eyes wild. You sneaky little. Sit down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. And the video wasn't over yet. The screen changed. A new clip started playing. This time, it was Brandon in a hotel room. But he wasn't alone. More gasps. A woman walked into view. Not me. Not Margaret. Someone else. She was tall, brunette, and beautiful in a cold, effortless way. She wore a silk robe, her nails perfect. I knew her right away. Brandon's ex. She walked up to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The room exploded. People shouted, some screamed. Margaret collapsed into her chair, pale as a ghost. Brandon looked from the screen to me, stunned. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned back to the mic. And there it is, I said, my wedding gift. I dropped the microphone. People stood, some started filming. Phones were out, eyes were wide. My maid of honor rushed over and grabbed my arm. Are you okay? She whispered. I was. Because for the first time in 4 years, I finally saw the truth. Brandon wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a mama's boy. He was both, a cheater and a mama's boy. And I was going to make sure he paid for it. For a moment, the room was completely silent. It felt like everyone had stopped breathing. Then came the chaos, gasps, people whispering, glasses clinking against tables. Some guests were recording, others just stared, mouths open. Margaret sat frozen, her lips slightly parted, eyes jumping between the screen and Brandon. Brandon moved. He lunged, toward the mic, toward me, toward anything he could grab to stop what was happening. But I was ready. I stepped back and let the video do the talking. Because it wasn't over. The footage kept playing. This wasn't just some quick fling with his ex, it was worse. I just don't get it, his ex said, running her finger along his jaw. You're marrying her, but you keep coming back to me. Brandon gave her that same smug smile. You know how it is. She's safe. Safe. That word hit me like a punch. The woman kept going. She doesn't understand you like I do. She never will. Brandon sighed like he was bored. She's just convenient. The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, shaking heads. Margaret spun toward him. Brandon, she said, her voice shaking. Brandon froze. But she wasn't angry about the cheating. She was angry because he had picked someone else, someone other than her. You said she wasn't a threat, Margaret hissed, grabbing his arm, her nails digging into his skin. Brandon pulled away, his face twisted in frustration. Are you serious right now? And just like that, the strange, creepy bond between them started to break. I watched them fall apart, right there in front of everyone they had fooled for years. But I wasn't done. I turned back to the guests. I know what you're all thinking, I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. How did I know to record this? How did I know to plant cameras? Whispers filled the room again. I smiled, because there's one more video. I lifted the remote and clicked to the final clip. The screen changed. Now we were in a restaurant, a fancy, private dining room with wine bottles lining the walls, and at the table sat Brandon and Margaret. People in the room stopped breathing again. On the screen, Brandon looked tired. He swirled a glass of whiskey. She's starting to ask too many questions, he said. Margaret leaned in. Then you need to control her. Brandon shook his head. She's not stupid. She's going to figure it out. Margaret's voice dropped. Then do what your father did. Gasps echoed through the hall. Because Brandon's dad, Margaret's husband, was dead. A car crash, they said. At least, that's what everyone thought. Brandon looked uncomfortable. That's different, he said. Margaret's voice was cold. Is it? The crowd went wild. People shouted, chairs scraped. Margaret screamed and lunged toward the projector, but my bridesmaids were already in front of it, blocking her. Brandon looked like he'd seen a ghost. Everyone now knew, my husband wasn't just a cheater, And his mom wasn't just overbearing. She might have killed his father. And she had thought about doing the same to me. I faced them, feeling calm, cold and clear. So, I said, tilting my head, anyone want to explain that? Margaret's breath was fast and shaky, her eyes darted around like she was trapped. Brandon just stood there, pale and shaking. The guests were shouting. Is that real? Did she just say what I think she said? What the hell? I stood tall, holding the mic. Then Margaret snapped. She turned on me, her voice shaking with rage. You sneaky little bit. Gasps rippled through the room again. Some guests stepped back, others looked ready to step in. Brandon flinched, but for once, he didn't defend her. I let out a quiet, controlled laugh. You don't like it when people see the truth, do you? I said. Margaret's fists clenched. Brandon finally spoke up. This isn't what it looks like, he said weakly. I wasn't really. I turned to him so fast he went silent. Which part, Brandon? I asked. The part where you let your mom control you? The part where you cheated on me? Or the part where you sat across from her while she talked about making me disappear? He had no answer. Just opened and closed his mouth like he couldn't breathe. Margaret pointed at me, shaking. You've ruined everything. You think you're so smart, but you don't understand this family. I think I understand just fine, I said calmly. You controlled your husband, and when he stopped obeying, you got rid of him. I looked straight at Brandon. And you? You were next. Her next puppet. I watched his face change, realization hitting him like a truck. He whispered, "Oh my God." For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me. Fear of her. Margaret went still, her face turned cold and blank. I turned to the guests, my people and his. They came to watch a wedding. They ended up watching a nightmare unfold. You all saw it, I said calmly. If anything happens to me, you'll know exactly who to blame. Margaret laughed, but it didn't sound real. You think you're clever, she said. No one's going to believe you. I raised an eyebrow. They already do. They just watched the video. She looked around the room, panicked. That's when she saw them, phones out, people filming and even live streaming. This wasn't just some family drama anymore. This was proof. Then Brandon grabbed my wrist suddenly. Please, he whispered, his voice shaking. You don't understand. She won't let me go. She never has. She never will. For just a moment, I saw true fear in his eyes. At his own wedding, he was begging me, not to stay, but to save him. From her. Margaret's face twisted with anger, her hand clenched around her wine glass. You weak little boy, she spat. You think she's helping you? She just ruined your life. Brandon let go of me like my touch burned him. And then, something I'll never forget. Margaret raised her hand to slap him. But this time, Brandon didn't just take it. He caught her wrist. The room went completely silent. He stared at her, shaking all over. You don't control me anymore, he said quietly. Margaret froze. For the first time, she looked scared. And then, the biggest shock of all. Someone stepped forward from the crowd. An older man with gray hair. He looked familiar. Margaret's face turned pale. Because standing in front of her, alive and breathing, was someone who was supposed to be dead. Her husband. Brandon's father. The man she had told everyone was gone. Gasps, people whispering, phones still filming. Margaret stumbled back, grabbing a chair to steady herself. You. She said, barely able to speak. Brandon's dad looked straight at her, surprised. Margaret couldn't move. Brandon turned to him, wide-eyed. Dad? His father nodded slowly. I wanted to come back sooner, but I needed proof, real proof. Margaret dropped into the chair like all the strength had left her. The truth was out, she hadn't killed him. He had faked his death to get away from her. And now he was back, to help end her reign for good. The police were called, not just because of the threats against me, but for years of lies, abuse, and stolen money. Margaret was dragged out screaming. Brandon just stood there, stunned, as everything around him fell apart. I didn't know if I felt sorry for him. Maybe just glad it was over. One thing I knew for sure, I was never going to be a stand-in for his mom. And I wasn't going to be someone's backup plan. So when Brandon looked at me with watery eyes and said, "Can we talk?" I smiled, lifted my wedding dress, and walked away. Because this was no longer my mess. I got the marriage annulled. Brandon moved far away, Probably to escape the mess his family left behind. As for Margaret, she ended up exactly where she belonged. And me? I started fresh, no drama, no lies, no toxic mother-in-law. Just peace. And honestly, that was the best wedding gift I could have ever given myself.